This is a promise, and
Mm.
okay, a promise, promise, and here is my little. So this started because somebody's kiddo was in this little batty thing, and I thought it was the cutest thing, and they heard me squeak, and I am notoriously dark and reserved and brooding, and just in my corner being very goth. So the idea of me in a little batty, but wait, there's more. Okay, so I
Wait,
went.
did you keep going?
These are my little slippers.
Yes.
And these are my bat jammies.
Oh my gosh. Is this the gift that keeps on giving?
And this is my Bo Bat plushie that an amicable ex got for me on one of our dates because I
Oh
am
my,
that ridiculous goth person. And yes, if you are familiar with Hotel Transylvania, this
is
is
that what
that.
that is? Well, I mean, excellent job on committing fully to your promise. I mean, you went all out. You freaking weirdo. I love
I
it.
won't last. It's kind of toasty, so I think I will be out of this fairly soon. But I figured also I would just keep the bat jammies on because they're actually kind of cool.
They are cute. They're nice and silky.
They're very silky. They're very comfortable. They are from Killstar, which I give an embarrassing amount of money to when I have the cash and the inclination.
What is Killstar?
It is a goth, a really body positive, gender positive goth outlet of everything that I would have wanted when I was a baby bat going to the clubs. Could never have afforded
Nice.
back then, but so yeah, they're definitely banking on some old Gen X nostalgia there, I think.
All right, I gotta check it out. All right, well, so we should probably start with first of all, that was your promise to
That
getting
was
it over 22,000 and 30%, which we're 30% to our goal on our Kickstarter. And so that's incredible. We're almost, yeah, now we're at 22,815. So we're doing really well. This is the time of the campaign that it kind of like dips a little bit, and that's totally normal. But we're still getting like a lot of feedback about the projects and a lot of people who are really interested in potentially being part of like season 2 and different live streams coming up. So we have some really interesting stuff, and we also have new tiers that we promised you. I know a lot of you have been asking about international tiers, so we have some of those for you. And yeah, we also a couple of you have asked about like add-ons, and we're working on the, oh yeah, take
Yep.
it
All
off,
right. Yep.
take it off.
Unintentional. Too warm now.
Getting saucy.
Oh. Okay.
Stop. So yeah, we have some add-ons that are coming up. I know one of you, a couple of you actually, I think, asked about those. We wanted to roll out the tiers first, so the add-ons will be coming in the next week. I know that some of you are like, this thing isn't in this tier and I want it. So can I just like add it on? So we are working on that. Don't worry. And our amazing behind the scenes, I just I want to,
Maestro.
yeah, Maestro. There we go. Is going to go over the rewards that are new and
I
amazing.
honestly I blame that Maestro Cat Rogers.
Yeah, Rogers.
Everything Cat comes up with is so cool. You just want all of it. And I want to say, like, if you like that Sasquatch t-shirt, you have to thank Cat's husband, who
True.
saw the little doodle that Cat did for that tier and was like, I want that on a t-shirt.
I want that. I also want that
Yeah.
really bad. It's so cool. I want both of the t-shirts. So Kat's gonna we're gonna summon Kat here. And she's gonna go over the new tiers, which I'm super pumped about. I want all of them. So
Yes, so I'm going to help walk you all through all of the tiers. We have 6. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. Wahaha! Okay, so
Look at how fancy we are. We can share screens.
I know.
I know. What's this tech stuff? All right. Technomancy, necromancy, It's all the same.
Definitely.
I'm really good at one of these, but not the other.
Not the other.
I'll
So
let you all guess.
let us crawl through this list. So we have 6 new tiers, and we have a new international tier, which is the Global Poltergeist. So that includes the Cryptid Insider perks, thank you shout out on Follow the Woo podcast and Buried Secrets podcast, and a deluxe digital wallpaper pack that yours truly will be putting together for you. And I promise it'll be chef's kiss.
Dope.
As we move down, many of you have seen this, or some of you may have. If you haven't, you should go check it out. It is the Bigfoot Baddie Limited. There is only, I think, 32 left, last I looked. And that includes the Bigfoot Baddie t-shirt, a very special art print, again, by yours truly. You'll be seeing that coming out soon. I think we'll tease it a little later on.
And
And
this is my favorite part.
this is the one that I really like the most. Magically imbued cat whisker for protection and good luck. Zosh, will you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay. So first of all, it's not like I'm chasing the cats down and plucking their whiskers. Ozzy sheds his whiskers with great regularity, and we have a friend who would make wands, and he would put various things, and had a bunch of wands that he would do a cat whisker in the wand. So we were already saving cat whiskers and putting them in a little magical spot to like just suck up all of the energy in the house. And he hit a slump in creativity and hasn't been doing the cat whisker wands. So instead, we've got a drawer full of cat whiskers. Every once in a while, it's a Remy or a Bliss, but almost all of them are Ozzy. Don't ask me how he does it, but like they're like these this long, white with a little black tip because he's a tabby. But yep, whiskers from my home and my heart from our beloved companions. Each of the cats is a familiar to a different housemate.
Yeah, and I think we're going to get together and work to really put some oomph into them as well,
Yeah.
and deliver something that is really unique and super. I've never heard of another Kickstarter doing this, so
Yeah, and cat whiskers are awesome and used a lot in my experience for like protection when you're driving and things like that. Like mojo bags and stuff like that if you're, looking at it from like a witchcraft lens.
I actually use them to write sigils.
Oh, that's such a cool idea.
They are stiff enough at the part that goes into the little thing. If you get that type of whisker, it hasn't broken off. You can write with it with the right type of ink.
That's an awesome idea.
Yeah. And it's not like you're going to write a whole page, but they are good for like a very short spell or a sigil. And so, yeah, there's a whole thing with that. They function as a very tiny quill.
nice.
Weird cat people knowledge.
Fucking weirdos.
And moving right along, we also are introducing our Rainbow Demon and Rainbow Demon International tier.
Wait till you see the t-shirt. Holy cow.
Wait till you see the t-shirt. We're going to go over what's in each one of these real quick, and then I'll show you the reveal of the t-shirt for this one, because it is my favorite.
Again, cat magic. Cat magic. Not
Cat
magic,
magic.
but that
Cat magic and cat's magic.
Yes,
So-
cat.
So the Rainbow Tier Demon. Wow. Rainbow Demon original Pride Demon t-shirt, Pride Demon rainbow bracelet, digital copy of the State Changer series, which was lovingly donated. Super secret live stream with Finn and Michelle Belanger, both in drag.
Yeah.
Now, the international tier of this is very similar, except you won't be getting the t-shirt, but you will be getting a digital print that is print ready. So we'll be sending that out overseas so you can bring it to your nearest print shop and print yourself out a really amazing art print, or use it as a wallpaper, or however you would like to use it. But here's the reveal of the shirt.
Yeah.
Duh.
Dun, dun, dun. So cool.
And I have it a little different so we can get a slightly better picture of it. But this is our Pride Demon Pride Month.
Can you tell that Kat has done a lot of graphics and work for Mardi Gras?
Yeah. I mean, the Monroe dress is like the best part.
That's what sold it.
It's so good.
Couple of things to like vote on. And I was like, nope, it's got to be that one. Like the skirt blow up just sells it. And I like the little, there's a little halo between the horns that is fantastic.
Oh shit! I didn't see it until now.
It's
Smart.
incognito.
Clever.
Yes, I love it. Okay,
I mean, because every angel's a demon and every demon's an angel. That's
absolutely. It's a matter of perspective. And then moving right along, our next international tier that we do have is the Haunted VIP tier, which is very similar to the Haunted VIP 333 tier that is already on board. It's just modified slightly so that it is international friendly. So feel free to hop into that. You can see on the side of the page on their Kickstarter all the and mores that are available. But just an overview, you do get 2 VIP bonus episodes on this one, live stream of a Woo event, and a deluxe digital wallpaper pack. So this one's got some excellent perks as well.
Yeah, and that was one that people specifically had been asking about for an international version. So
Yeah.
ask and you shall receive.
Yes. That's why we love comments. So if you have something or if you're interested in wanting to see something else, like please let us know because we can always make some cool things happen. And
I would say that that's been my favorite thing with Kickstarter so far is the fact that we can change things as we go in order to like adapt to what people need and to like the sort of changing landscape of this as things unfold.
yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, so like you're part of this with us. So like join the fun and like let us know kind of things that you're excited to do or things you want to see or if you have cool ideas, anything like that that you'd like to share and just see this project lift off. Like we'd love to hear all of that stuff. It's tasty and delicious and we can make magic happen.
Yeah, and I feel free to be super weird about it too, because
Yeah.
we'll go there.
Well, I mean, it depends on the type of creepy, but like, I will not be sending Marilyn Monroe skirt blow up pictures of me as part of the Kickstarter. That's the wrong type of creepy.
Yeah, okay, not that. Let's be very clear. Yes, not that
But
kind of.
honestly, if you go digging around on the internet deep enough and far enough back into the 90s, there's plenty of stuff you can find. I used to model for like goth alt fashion.
I have found a few of those, and they're gems.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I highly recommend you Google.
Like I love and I hate the ones with Mistress Rita Seagrave only because like I had like a last minute like go get a haircut, and I was like, okay, I want blah 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 blah, and they gave me that Karen haircut that they that was like the like weird like that thing.
This
and
thing?
I'm like driving down to my shoot in Columbus going, what do I do with this? Like I looked like my next door neighbor in suburbia. It was terrible.
Right next door.
That is unfortunate.
I mean, no one
Not you in a Karen hair.
Mom, and she had the hair to match it. That was not my style. That was not what I asked for. I was so mad. But aside from like not my favorite hair, I got to model with Mistress Rita Seagrave, who was I think she may still work out. But if you're still out there, it was a pleasure working with you. You are a fantastic person.
Woo!
Alrighty. Our last additional tier is super rare tier, big bold letters. It's the digital necromancer tier. It's a pricey one because it has the most rare thing on this Kickstarter so far, which is a 15-minute reading with Michelle Belanger, who doesn't offer readings.
Not at all, ever.
I don't do things for hire like we've tried to do it. I'm not comfortable doing them for hire. I'll do them to teach people, but I don't have people just be like, can I pay you and do a reading? That doesn't happen. If you've asked, you know that.
Yeah, and the second thing is also this is the only tier that we're also offering this one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Being honest, the only exceptions I've ever made is when I was raising money for charity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then part number 2 on this one's also like really amazing, which is we want to invite those who are able to be part of a secret remote paranormal experiment for season 2. Because this is the limited tier, we feel comfortable being able to do that. So that's where this one's going. So it is amazing.
Yeah, and there's only 8 too. I mean, this is a really, really limited tier, and people have been asking for this price point too. That was one thing that we really wanted to like respond to.
Yeah. The other bits that are tied to this one as well are executive producer credits, 2 VIP bonus episodes, access to an exclusive newsletter, and invitation to exclusive polls. There are a couple more things, but you can find them on the sidebar of your Kickstarter page if you go visit the New Blood TV Kickstarter.
Yeah, that one's juicy actually, because I was looking at it today and you get basically everything that's in Fairy Fangirl, which is the 1111
Mm-hmm.
plus this stuff. I mean, there's like
Yeah.
a couple things that we took out, but I mean, it's almost exactly the same. So it is a really like good tier for your
Yeah.
buck. Tier for your buck.
Chill for your buck.
I was hanging out with Joseph Fargo and the Nox Arcana people, with the exception of Billy, because William Piotrowski's out in LA right now. Last night, talking about the Kickstarter and like just the challenge of how to create organic feeling, genuine feeling tiers and tier rewards, and like how that works. Because if anybody is familiar with Fargo and Monolith Graphics, like he is the OG Gothic artists. If you were a Gen X or a millennial shopping at Hot Topic or any store that Gothic t-shirts or posters, you own his work. You've heard his music. It's all over the place. Like he's the reason Midnight Syndicate even exists. That's a whole story. I won't get into it. And yeah, just like talking about like this is hard. Like it seems really simple on the surface, but then like getting a sense of like, okay, what do people actually want? What feels like value for what they're doing? Because there's much like our project relies upon everyone pitching in. We want to make sure that we're being thankful in the right way, and I don't know, it's there's a lot.
It's a lot. I mean, true. Yes. I mean, we're constantly thinking about like, what would I want for, this much support? And, and we're thinking about like our kinds of folks, witches and people who are really into the paranormal and goths and vampires and then people who are just like waiting for queer paranormal content, more queer paranormal content, because you taught me that there's already some queer paranormal content there.
Yes, Shane and his team. He does Q Files podcast now, but like if you go up onto IMDb, they were doing stuff with queer ghosts. Ken Summers has a book coming out on all of that stuff. So we're not the only ones, and I know that there was a team in Canada also. I don't know any of them personally, so I'm not going to be able to rattle names off.
Yes. So we are happy to, be a part of like more of the queer, because it really is. I didn't know there were any. So it's like, it's definitely the minority for sure.
It does not get any kind of like, nobody makes noise about it. Like it sort of gets more swept under the rug.
Yeah. So whoever's here, help us make noise about this, help us get it out there to all the folks, because a lot of times when you don't have a show that's already substantial, I mean, not a lot of times, all the time. If you don't have something already, you have to organically find all of the people who are dying to see this kind of content. And it just takes a long time. So we really rely on a lot of like word of mouth.
Well, I mean, one of the things about pitching, and this goes for pitching any project, whether it's a game or a book, a movie, a TV show, when you're in the pitch, one of the things that you're supposed to have is like your comparisons. This project is like this other project, which is wildly successful. And the problem you run into is if there's nothing out there like your project, they're like, well, how do we know that anybody wants this? It doesn't already exist.
Right.
Catch 22, like it's very much eating its own tail. Incredibly frustrating. And like get word out, because maybe sometime down the line we'll be the comp, like where what people are like, it'll be like this.
Hey-o! Wow, we just jumped above 23.
Yay!
All right.
Okay, keep it coming. I
feel like thank you, y'all.
Marker, but yay.
Telethon.
Yeah, well, it does feel a little bit like a telethon. But
it does. Okay, so we want to talk about some queer stuff tonight, queer in the paranormal. Where do you want to start? What's on your mind?
Oh, I mean, one thing I wanted to mention is it was Catherine Crowe, Night Side of Nature. Not necessarily queer, but we talk about women in the paranormal and men in the paranormal, and just sort of like the gendered image that we see of ghost hunters. and how, like, especially the 20th and 21st century, most of who we see as like official ghost hunters are dudes, and that's not where it started at all. And in some ways, it's sort of been like a lot of dudes being like, I can do that too. I bet I can do it better. And then just sort of taking over because that's our culture. So Catherine Crowe, Night Side of Nature, is worth a look. It's also like a free book that you can find on like online Gutenberg Project, Google Books, whatever. You know, it's one of those like old out of print, old timey wimey book.
Yeah. No, I think you mentioned that a little bit last time, I think, about how it wasn't actually this white dude bro sort of demographic that started paranormal investigations. And really, like, can you talk more about that? Because I don't actually know, and I'm curious.
Oh, well, I mean, think about okay. So actually, a little bit of historical stuff. The idea of ghost hunting as like going to a place to verify whether or not it's haunted, to debunk it, to investigate. We can trace a lot of that back to Harry Houdini and also many people's reaction to the spiritualist movement.
Mm-hmm.
So from the about 1840s or so onward, there's this whole like thing of speaking with ghosts that was started with the Fox sisters. A lot of the mediums throughout that time are women.
That's right. I do remember that. Yeah.
And the thing is, as with anything that becomes very popular and does in fact become a moneymaker for people, you will have people who are opportunistic, who are fakers. You've got people who don't realize that they're faking it too. Like that is actually probably the biggest bugbear for psychic stuff is it's easy to convince yourself of stuff and just not like objectivity is key if you're going to do psychic stuff. But without getting too much into that, the history being, there were enough people going, is this real? That they started to investigate. And this wasn't the first time. Benjamin Franklin actually led a group of basically investigators looking into the claims of mesmerism, which was a type of energy work that was wildly popular and had some kind of questionable, I will say, gynecological applications.
What?
It got a little weird.
Wait, what?
If these rumors and claims are true, it got a little weird.
Oh wait, I think I do kind of remember something about this vaguely.
Yeah, it got a little weird. Not gonna lie, but Ben Franklin was one of the folks who went to be like, I am a man of science and I am a reasonable person and like this knowledgeable statesman who also happens to have a whole side gig with the Hellfire Club. Don't mind that. It's probably just a bunch of dude bros hanging out and doing things, not at all summoning demons in the tunnels underneath Dashwood's estate.
No.
Ignore. But what I'm going to say is Franklin was at least claiming his expertise from somewhere and not merely as like, I'm a man of science. I'm also a man of science who is investigating paranormal claims.
Curious.
Like there's a reason people get interested in that. I mean, Houdini, famous debunker was because he wanted to believe.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons I think personally, knowing the history, the paranormal got kind of like supplanted by white dudes is lady mediums got a very bad rap. Most of them were very much under fire as being too hysterical and too emotional and not rational enough to be able to tell and measure their own experiences. And clearly they were all just hallucinating and making stuff up. And if they weren't trying to make a buck, they were just, crazy women.
Yeah. Hysteria. Yeah.
Yeah, no, there was definitely stuff that went on with that. So there's some intertwined colonialism, sexism. There's yucky stuff in there. But I mean, that's just sort of American history at this point. Western
in general, yes. Oh, okay, that's a jump.
I guess I'll keep talking about Houdini.
Yes, talk about
the
Houdini.
Life of Benjamin Franklin.
All right, y'all. Thank you.
But this is for Pride Month, so that doesn't exactly dig into queer stuff because part of it is we don't have enough data. We don't have enough like clear history to say this person definitely was and this person definitely was. It's so hard to queer history through the rear view mirror because there are long periods of time where people had to be so closeted. And it wasn't just like my family is going to disapprove. You could still get the death penalty for homosexual behavior in England during Lord Byron's time. So 1820, 1824, you could still be hung if people caught you, in flagrante with, especially with male on male. And that 1900, the reason Oscar Wilde died, he didn't die in prison, but he absolutely died as a result of his prison sentence. And that prison sentence was because he was gay. It was totally because of his relationship with, actually the son of a fairly well-connected political individual, the fellow who gave us the boxing rules, as weird as it is, the manly man whose other son had an affair with the prime minister, and we don't hear about that because he really couldn't put the prime minister to task over it. So he went after the Irish poet and playwright who was very, very flamboyant.
Yeah, I mean, it's upsetting to hear you talk about it because it's also happening now. I mean, I'm Turkish and I can't go to my country because I feel unsafe there. I can't go to Florida because I feel unsafe there. So there's it's sad to hear that it's still happening so much. And I think that makes it even more important for me, at least, more important for us to carve out a space that's really queer focused.
Well, like queer identities, the paranormal, witchcraft, and the occult intersect pretty significantly. And again, it often flies under the radar, but like, okay, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. These are folks who were doing stuff at the same time, at the height of spiritualism in the Victorian era. And it was mostly a bunch, the thing is history writes mostly about the white guys. Like you hear about S.L. McGregor Mathers and you hear about Stoker, who was actually involved in all of that. You hear about William Westcott, who was the coroner. Weirdly, also when the whole like Jack the Ripper stuff was going on, but we won't go down that rabbit hole. But you don't hear so much about Florence Farr, who was a brilliant writer of rituals. And Stoker, I bring him up because a letter has recently come to light, which was his unabashed love letter to Walt Whitman. Now, there's been debates about. I have given talks on. I think that there was, at the very least, an unrequited attraction. Stoker and Sir Henry Irving, and that's part of the dynamic that is so appealing in Dracula, because he casts himself both as Von Helsing and as Renfield, kind of working through those feelings. But seeing him openly about that. Stoker and Wilde went to school together. They romanced the same girl together. They were both attracted to her because she looked like a boy. They were clear about that.
I mean,
they liked her boyish good looks. So the thing is like, I would say that the most frustrating thing, if you want to look into the history of queer people and queer representation in the paranormal or the occult, is at a certain point, it's guesswork, it's conjecture. You will never know for sure because so much has been erased and so many people were forced to, almost like the old alchemists, couch things in all of this sort of like cloak and dagger code.
Yeah.
It's risky, but then you find like a little piece of gold where it's like, nope, Stoker is literally fanboying over Walt Whitman. There is no debate here. He would really like to snog him. like that's the thing. So if you had any question that the father of Dracula was at the very least exuberantly bisexual, that's a pretty good indicator that he didn't only like the ladies. And I mean, there were so many marriages of convenience. So my other pet theory, because if you go and look on Paranormal TV, how many of the mediums you see working are some flavor of queer, sometimes really openly, and sometimes you're like, yes, no, maybe. So my theory on that, actually, this is a conversation with me and Chip Coffee. When you have to like really dig deep into your soul and go, there is a thing about me that is different, that the world judges, that my family may kick me out over, and you make your peace with, but it's me and it's part of my truth and I'm going to live it. You get this unique and incredibly empowering perspective that nothing about you is something you should shy away from, that you
Mhm.
have all of these hidden depths, and you ask yourself, who am I really? Not who am I expected to be? Who am I when I've been told who to be? Who has my society or my family tried to shape me as? Who am I really? And I think that you will see a lot of folks who are more comfortable with their psychic and paranormal abilities, who are also queer, because they've had to go through that
Mhm.
already to simply live their lives and be who they are.
Yeah. Well, and I think it would be kind of cool to hear you talk a little bit about queerness in the vampire community
Oh,
specifically too. I mean,
yeah.
and that's fascinating. I mean, witchcraft as well, like the covens that I've been involved with have been very queer. I feel like, a lot in every space that I've been in that has been spiritual or paranormal
Mm.
or magic related, there's always been a high percentage of queer people. And I think you're right. That's why.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Cal's got it. It's liminality. Like, we're between
Yeah.
walls. Like we are outside of the bounds, and that is a certain powerful type of magic all by itself, simply existing outside of the bounds. Uh, I don't talk about my personal practice a lot. I'm not. If somebody asked about like one of the differences between vampires and witches, especially in the early days, why it was important to kind of hive them off, is when I was starting as a baby practitioner in the 80s and 90s, witchcraft was very much a goddess centric tradition. It was very much also a religion. Like, witchcraft and paganism were very intertwined in a way that they've started to like not be so much anymore. You don't have to be a religious pagan to also practice witchcraft now, but back then there was a perception that they were part and parcel of one another. And I'm at best a non-theist. I don't really, a lot of folks who leaned more toward left-hand path, and that's a somewhat appropriated term, and in Western occultism means a widely different thing than it does from its original place. In Western occultism, left-hand path is basically like you're not all about deities and bending the knee to the deity. You're not about the God out there. You're about the God in here.
Mhm.
And so, like, finding your own inner divinity and finding your path to that was a really important thing, not only to me, but to most of the folks who found themselves kind of shying away from the, like, you know, here is the goddess, worship her. So many of us were coming from very restrictive religious backgrounds where we had already been told to bend the knee to a God that we didn't respect, a God that we told wouldn't really love us unless we were somebody who we totally weren't, and a God who we were told would like let our friends burn in hell and suffer the penance of AIDS. Like you have to understand this in context. Like the 80s and the 90s, I have so many friends, and I'm not the only one. Like, there are so many Gen Xers who never made it to my age because of AIDS, and because of the way it was handled. And it was seen as like this scourge, and for many people seen as a justified scourge.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
so so our cultural context is religion is telling us that we are all of these queer people, we are unrepentant sinners and we are automatically damned. We're the whole like, oh, pedophile thing, like that is, I'm so used to that. Like at this point I'm just like, oh, same old song. Anybody who's different is clearly after the kiddies, and it's always the people who are actually doing things. And like, I won't get into that too much, but so
Drag queens.
yeah, no, like it's just,
Later.
it's infuriating because it is a flashback to the 80s and 90s that I've already lived through, and I thought we got through, thought we got past.
Mm.
Okay, so in inherent liminality, one of the reasons that you'll see a lot of goth elements in the vampire subculture is the goth aesthetic. Goth grew out of punk. Punk grew out of like the Marjorie. I'm thinking about a different politician entirely that I also equally dislike. Maggie Thatcher,
Mm.
Reagan era, and just a whole like stick it to the man, like very, very anti-establishment. Punk was a lot more violent, like it was more like explode out with that rage.
Mhm.
Goth more turn the rage inward and have it expressed through the poetry and art, and like kind of like sing your pain to the world.
Mhm.
Part of that aesthetic has always been androgyny, a liminality, a space between the living and the dead, and a space between. It's very crepuscular, if you're familiar with that word.
I am not. What does that mean?
Twilight, dusk. That
Crepuscular.
crepuscular. Think like crepe paper. It's that delicate moment, that perfect balance, where light has given away to darkness, but the world looks new and strange in that light. The things, because light can obscure as much as dark does, but in that in-between space, you have equal amounts of light and shadow, and things come into relief that you might miss otherwise.
Yeah. Read someone.
Yeah, like we lived through it, and if I see like, especially like hair on fire, like stressed, especially on Twitter, it's because I devoted 2 decades and then some of my life trying to speak out against, change, repair, steer us away from the satanic panic and this stuff. And it's really, really hard to not ask myself, what good did I do?
Yeah.
Like, was that a waste? I don't feel like it was a waste. I would not change it at all. There's so many things that wouldn't have happened if there weren't people like me still like fighting through that whole thing. And I won't, but it's a little depressing right now, not gonna lie, especially as a Gen X. So the vampire as archetype in the Gothic subculture was not the vampire of folklore, was not the vampire who was basically a drunken peasant who has come back to wreak vengeance. Folkloric vampires are kind of angry ghosts in a lot of ways. And they're a very, very different thing. The vampire, as it gets moved into literature and movies, particularly in the 19th century, the early 19th century, the vampire gets associated with several very queer people. Lord Byron is sort of our titular vampire. Like, that's where, it's not the first place the vampire makes the leap into literature, but it is one of the most impactful. And all of Byron's queerness, problematic and as well as not, in just completely saturates the character of Lord Ruthven, or Ruthven if you are an American speaking reader, in John William Polidori's book, The Vampire. And that's where we get sort of a flashpoint where vampires become these humanized creatures that are a reflection of liminal humanity, of people who walk between, who are in many ways empowered by and liberated by that otherness. They look like humans, but they do not participate in every aspect of human society. They are they have set themselves beyond the reach of a number of social mores. And at first, 19th century especially, that's horrific. Like that is a thing to be afraid of. They must be destroyed. Lord Ruthven is destroyed by the end. Dracula, who is also a sort of biographical sketch of a person that Stoker, much like Polidori, was attracted to and had a lot of conflict with, Sir Henry Irving. So you have this queer subtext in these vampire stories. And whether you're aware of the history and the actual biographies of these people or not, it lives in those stories. Myth is the story we tell to make the world make sense. And we put, myth carries truth. That truth resonates. And sometimes that truth points us toward facts about our own lives. The vampire for the Gothic subculture gave it, that aesthetic is why none of the boys of my generation who were goth had a problem, no matter they were gay, straight, bi, or otherwise, wearing skirts, wearing nail polish, wearing eyeliner. Like, that was part of the aesthetic. Pretty boys, okay, nobody cared.
Dracula's sexy.
Yeah, like Dracula always came off sexy. There's a reason Dracula came off as sexy, because Stoker couldn't not find this person. He also, like, he found his attraction monstrous because of his society, but also it was attracted. And like the conflict, the same thing with Polidori. Polidori ended his life largely because of how he was and living in a time where you could be killed for that.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to say, I do not want to minimize the trauma, and that to some extent embracing these was a trauma response, was trying to find, like, I have nowhere else to fit in the world. I will take this, even though they're monstrous. Actually, because they're monstrous, because my society says I'm a monster. So I will be a monster. I will be a sexy damn monster wearing black and look at all of the stuff that I can do. And you know what? There is power in being a monster. I have found my power by being your monster.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not so bad being a monster over here. There's other monsters. We have a lot of fun.
That's true.
Yes. Oh, yes. I totally got gloss over. I was going to mention Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu, Carmilla. Carmilla is an incredibly queer vampire story. Queer to the point where I remember there was a commentator writing about Carmilla. I think Basil Copper. He's got a book on vampires, and he does a reading of Carmilla. It is so obviously sexual in the relationship between the narrator of Carmilla and Carmilla, the female vampire, that he just assumes the narrator is a guy. He cannot. It doesn't matter how many times they refer to the narrator as a girl. He cannot wrap his head around the fact that this is a sapphic vampire story. There's no pretending it's not. Carmilla is queer. Queer AF, if you will.
Queer AF.
Lives on the internet.
I think we can say fuck.
I mean, you know.
My kids wouldn't be as safe in this world. Yes.
No, it's true. Okay, on my darkest times, I have a secret list. And that secret list is the names of all of the people that I know with absolute certainty, because they have told me that I have saved their lives, that they are alive now and doing the things that they're doing because of something that I did or said. And if you're out there and you're one of those people on that list, know that I go through that list, and it helps me get through these hard days.
That's amazing. I mean, really. And it's you just don't know who you can. Yeah. I mean, you just don't know who you can help. I mean, it feels like it's minimal what you're doing sometimes, or that it's not making a dent. I know people say that a lot, like, oh, why am I even fighting? It doesn't make a dent, but it does. It really does, even for just one person, or like you said, however many people are on that list.
The one that got me the most recently was, I live in suburbia at the end of a cul-de-sac. When I moved in, one of the local papers ran a vampire evades arrest, like total yellow journalism. Everything was a lie. They got away with it because they didn't mention me by name, but everybody knew whose house they were pointing it toward. We got harassed. We got vandalized. Like it was nonstop. And I wasn't budging because we'd worked hard to be able to buy a house. Dang it.
Dang, it's hard.
Like, really hard. I was doing something at a local witchcraft shop. Like, first of all, Medina ended up with a witchcraft shop. Now we have 3. So yay. As much as things are changing to the bad, they're also changing to the good. It's kind of cool. And there was a kid who was like maybe 19, maybe. And he came up to me after stuff, and he let me know that, like, and he was obviously queer. Like he was very obviously queer. And he'd said, like, he lived a couple of streets over. He grew up where I was at. And he was like maybe 12 when I moved in. Just hearing that I existed, hadn't met me, but knowing that someone was an adult, owned a house, had books that were published, like lived a life and lived it exactly as who I was, let him know that it was okay to be who he was.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly inspiring to have like even just one person be able to give you that different viewpoint, especially if you come from like a small rural area and you haven't seen anybody like that, and you think it's just impossible to find anyone who's remotely feeling like you or looks like you or acts like you. And then you see someone who's, I mean, you've even done that for me somewhat, and I'm like been out for a long time, but I mean, as far as in the paranormal and magical space, when I got to see how you live and operate and how you have been living and operating for so long, it was like, fuck this like society and how it runs. I want to live like Michelle Belanger does. And here we are.
Well, I say it partly because you don't have to be an activist in every march to change the world. All it takes is living authentically.
Yes.
Like, don't feel like you're failing if you're not out there at every march, that you're not like funding every like thing that people are doing to try to like raise money to protect trans people here, there, and everywhere, because that will never stop. That fight never stops. But what my life has taught me is, while that stuff is necessary and valuable and something that for the people who are suited to it, who have the fire and the strength and the spoons to do it, that is necessary. But in the long term, what really changes the world is just being you, wherever you are. You won't even know who you've changed, but being you changes the world.
Yeah. I mean, it really does. And there have been, that's why this show is so important. A lot of paranormal community can be super unwelcoming. So to have this representation, people will see themselves and be encouraged to be curious. Yeah.
Well, a funny, so again, like we've got really short memories, and it's easy to have a short memory, especially with like a news cycle that is like at this point 12 hours. Like it's ridiculous.
More if you're on the other one.
Yeah. So back when Paranormal State first started, the idea of having an open practicing witch on the paranormal team was unheard of.
Totally.
Because pretty much everybody was they were either cosplaying the Ghost Hunters TAPS team, so they were like, everything is here to be debunked, or they were cosplaying the Warrens, everything occult is evil. And
everything is a demon.
Yeah, everything's a demon. And first of all, let me be clear. Elfie is not Wiccan. They went with that because they expected that from Buffy, people would know what a Wiccan was. But Elfie is actually, she's a Thelemite.
That's very different.
It's a very different thing.
Very different.
Incredibly different. She comes from a storied, an enviable line of a family practice. And her father was a fantastic teacher, and not only like she's got Elfie's story is so much more complex and so much more interesting than what we got to see on Paranormal State. But the point being, at that point in time, I had so many folks who were in the vampire community and were, spirit mediums or psychic because of what they were as vampires. They were also into the paranormal, but they could not be out to their team because they would get kicked out for being a witch or being a vampire or being anything other than like, you could kind of get away with being a sort of like white light crystal bunny. And that was about it. Well, and I say crystal bunny because that's not to say like crystals are bad, but like there was a certain type of like very whitewashed, very like made to be palatable to the Christians. Mm-hmm. Crystals were sort of okay, and a bundle of sage was sort of okay, but much past that was not.
Yeah, the New Age movement. Yeah. Do you read French?
Bonsoir. Demain, je ne parle pas l'anglais, mais j'adore cette personne. I adore. Okay, so I don't speak English, but I adore the person, Michelle, and basically everything that's being said.
Awesome.
Bonsoir.
Bonsoir.
Yeah, say bonsoir. That means good evening. Merci. That's thank you.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup, mon cœur.
Yeah, I think, you brought up the New Age movement and how that was like acceptable at that time. And I think it's still like that, and that's another thing. There was like a previous comment saying, even if you're not queer, it's great to just see like authenticity and like something more dynamic than what we've been seeing. And I think that's something that we really focus on in these shows and I think a lot of it comes back to the fact that we are queer and we are in those liminal spaces. So we are open to trying the weirdest shit. So we do have witches and we do have psychics and we do have technology and we do have vampires and we do have just like, oh, could we do this? Like, this is so fucking bizarre. Let's try it, and I think that's what makes it so exciting for us and why we want to continue doing it.
Oh, I know there's I'm going through like there's because I'm
such what do I want to talk about?
Like no, there's so many points so to kind of discursively go back to one of the things, my personal practice, I I approach deities more in an archetypal way, as sort of like a reflection of qualities in myself. That is not to say I don't believe in deities. Like, I know people who but it's that relationship.
Yeah.
Is not the relationship that works for me. And I think that deities are cool enough to know that there's many different ways to have relationships with just all of the powers of the universe. My particular one, I mean, there's a couple that speak to me, but the one that comes back again and again is Set. A deeply misunderstood ancient Egyptian deity who is one of these sort of iconic deities that got mushed into the Christian Satan for so many reasons, who, like, even the Egyptians, I mean, we're talking a culture that, like, their religious system existed for minimum 3,000 years. So think about, like, how much things would change over that time. Set's story started off very different from the where it ended. Like, if we go digging around in, like, the Greco-Roman Egyptian times, Set is like the creepy uncle, weird stuff with the Horus. And I mean, like, they don't even pretend, but it's because by that point in time, Set's liminal, antinomian, and genuinely queer qualities were no longer socially acceptable, so he had to be demonized. But originally, Set, great of strength, was the god who stood on the prow of the bark of Ra when it traveled through the underworld. And Set was the only deity strong enough to be able to travel that dark liminal space and overcome the chaos in the form of the serpent Apep. Set was the guy who made sure everyone was safe when they traveled through darkness. He was the outsider. He was the outlander. He was the god of foreigners and misfits and strangers for a reason, because he himself was out of bounds. And that queer, liminal, out of bounds aspect, that, like, this is where my power lives, betwixt and between, beyond the bounds of what you consider known and acceptable space. In the unacceptable, that is where I dare go, and that is where I find my power and my strength, and I bring it back to you. And that's why Set speaks to me. But Set was like a big bad to, like, even, like, bring up in a Wiccan circle or a pagan circle in the 80s and 90s. So again, that's where I started to, like, you know what, I'm gonna do my own thing. I wasn't the only one doing that at the time. The goth stuff, like, you had dark pagans and dark occultists and a lot of stuff trying to find their space in a place that was blindingly white.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of different levels, but very white light.
Yes.
A lot of that was also a lot of that blinding white light was a sort of survival response to the satanic panic. That's why so many people would be like, we're not sacrificing goats in the basement, because they were being accused of it. We're not sacrificing children, because we were regularly accused of it. And so you had this sort of, like, push all the way to that side. And it had the effect of also whitewashing everything. Anything that the satanic panic could possibly whisper as perversion got swept under the rug. So, like, people were like, well, we don't do, like, we're not kinky, we're not too queer, we're not this, we're not that, we're acceptable, please accept us, please daddy, please like us.
Daddy.
Yeah.
Please, daddy.
But that was definitely a vibe. And
yeah,
a bunch of us were like, just nope.
Yeah, it was really a problematic time, and I think we keep going back to this idea that, like, the importance of having queer cast and crew, which it overlaps when you go on these adventures, is like that we do get to be in that betwixt and between that you mentioned. You know, we and that, I feel like, gives us almost like a superpower in a way. There is more activity, it seems, when people who are used to being in sort of like a liminal space in some way or another than maybe not. And I don't know if that's true, but it's how it feels.
Times was one of my first contacts that let me know I am not evil. She gave me the ability to move beyond the broom closet.
Get out of the broom closet. Get out of all the closets.
Like, representation matters. I can't. I'm sitting here staring at a bunch of, like, things pinned to a filing cabinet, and one of them is the vampire tapestry by Susan McKee Charnas. So one of the things, there were a lot of writers who, during a certain time period, like they put their beliefs in fiction. They put their weirdness in fiction because that was an acceptable place to put it, where they wouldn't get censored, where they could still get word out. That's not to say that everybody who was writing about like vampires or weird stuff was like secretly encoding the truth. But you write about things that appeal to you as fiction, nonfiction, whatever. So when I was growing up, there were a couple of writers whose stuff I read, and I was like, I think maybe we have some similar beliefs, but that can't be right because nobody believes in this. This is crazy. Well, my life path led me to the point where many of these became peers, and not only peers, but friends. So I met Susie McKee Charnas. She's passed this year, by the way. And the first thing she says to me is like, I know you from a past life. Just, she had hit the old lady level of I give no shits.
Yeah.
And this is just who I am. And we had the best conversation of meeting one another again for the first time in these particular bodies. No holds bar, no anything, no, just, and she wasn't the first, but like that level of just like, oh, hey, I know you. Well, crap. No wonder Quinn likes you so much. You know, we were buddies, you know, this, you know, not to give away any of her perfect stuff, but representation matters, but open representation matters because then the deniability, like our culture will make us doubt. Like all of us are laboring under so much terrible crushing imposter syndrome where we start to think like, am I really the only one? Am I crazy? Like, is there something wrong with me? There must be something wrong with me because everything else in my culture says that this is what's normal.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. From Addie's World. You are an amazing woman, Michelle. You have been fighting since you came into this world in every sense of the word. That is very true. Millions of people. You know, that's the weird thing is that millions isn't a weird number because we had like 3.5 million viewers on Paranormal State. And that is a number I could never, and that was only the US. That was only the US. I could never wrap my brain.
It was a huge show. Yeah.
Never wrap my brain around it.
Yes, I do have a podcast.
Yeah.
Follow the Woo podcast. And you can listen to it on all platforms. And thank you so much. I appreciate that compliment. I do have kind of a raspy voice, I guess.
Well, the smoke ain't helping.
No, that smoke ain't helping from Quebec. Yeah.
Yeah, from Quebec.
Yeah. I think that it's important that let me just look here. I know there was a question. Okay. Somebody asked us, and we should probably address it. I said we would.
Okay.
Let me find it. It is hoopa-doopa-doopa-doop. Oh, here we go. Okay. This is from someone from the Kickstarter. It's in a comment. Their name is Echo. And they said, I am so ready for a paranormal investigation show with a queer crew who approach the unknown with a sense of curiosity and wonder. Can't wait for this. When you say this project has been an initiation for almost the entire cast and crew, I would love to hear more about what an initiation or initiatory process means to the crew and why it's important. If someone had no frame of reference for what initiation means in the context of paranormal investigation, how would you explain it to them? Good question.
I mean, a word that I will use liberally instead of initiation, because I early on found that like folks in academia understood what I was talking about, initiatory experience and like, you know, death and rebirth and shamanic stuff, but like awakening,
yeah.
Where like you like suddenly you open your eyes like in a way that you don't realize that you were asleep and dreaming before, and now there's this spark. Awakening is a crisis event where the way that you perceive and experience the world changes, and changes in such a profound way that you now look at everything and experience everything through a different lens. It is not a single event. It has a spark as a single event, but I will liken it more to, you were in a darkened cave and you struck a match to light a candle, and suddenly you can see much better than you did, but you also realize that there are many more candles, and the cave is far darker and deeper and more extensive than you ever dreamed.
Yes.
So each of those spark events, those initiatory experiences, and I would say that broadly, the initiatory experience is realizing first you're in a cave.
Step one.
Yeah, becoming aware that you are
Yes.
dark and that there is something you can do to lift that darkness.
Yeah, we're getting into like Plato's allegory here.
Oh yeah, and I was avoiding saying anything about Plato's cave. Yes, you went there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I did. Sorry.
Realizing that like those are shadows on the wall. What's actually beyond the shadows? What's making the shadows?
Yeah. And what would happen if I got out of the cave? All that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, because I am the one who's in a process of awakening, I would say, yeah, it's important. The distinction of it's not one singular event. And that's why we could continue having many, many seasons, because it's almost like peeling the layers back of an onion and understanding more of yourself and how. There's actually somebody I interviewed on the podcast who said it great. It was, what if, it was her question, what if the mundane was the magic, not the magic was the mundane, not the other way around. You know what I mean? We live in these lives where we're doing all this stuff all the time, but what if the magic is actually the real of who we are, the base of who we are, and everything else is the stuff that's like been put on top of it. And I feel that when you start pulling that away, you start to more magical things begin to happen, and there's all of these synchronicities that unfold that are like bizarre and mind-blowing and also very uncomfortable sometimes.
Cal has a good comment. It's the experience that makes you realize there's a journey to begin with. I'm talking about initiation, and you'll light more matches along the way.
Oh, I just got chills. Yeah, that's a really important part, is that, oh yeah, that's just there's so much.
It's definitely a process. It's not a one-off.
Contagious. And
there was an article by what I presume was a skeptical scientist, but not one of the like, I'm just gonna like crap all over the idea of belief, that came across my feed the other day, that was saying like, if ghosts are real, we would have like there would be light. And I assume male from the name. The main premise was that it's not supernatural if we can actually prove that they exist. Like if we could measure it, if you could get a picture of a ghost with a regular camera, it's not supernatural. It is natural. And the way the article was written, that was a gotcha. And I was like, no, that's actually the point.
Yeah.
Initiatory experiences, having watched people go through them at this point for decades, longer if you believe in reincarnation, people realize that they are part of the phenomenon. They are part of the magic. That's actually, it's not that like this person who's called a psychic is the only person who can do that. They're just the person who's a little bit more in tune with it, or has like worked through their crap enough to be able to be open about it. But you are having those experiences all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fundamental part of your existence as a human to perceive more than your 5 physical senses. And it's simply becoming aware of where all that information is coming from and the shape of it. And Carl Jung, lots of people, Carl Jung is, there's a lot to Jung. Some of it good, some of it bad, like so many people in the past. But there's a quote that he has about bringing, basically making the dark conscious, like bringing things into consciousness is a key part of my own practice and things that I recommend to everybody all the time. And awakening is part of that. Initiatory experience is part of that. It's not suddenly discovering something that didn't exist before.
Right.
It's realizing that the territory inside of you is far more complex than you ever allowed for, and seeing it, like really seeing it for the first time. It doesn't mean that you understand it immediately. Actually, far from it. It tends to raise more questions than it offers answers.
Sure does.
But
Shadow work.
Oh no, yeah, shadow work is a huge part.
Yes.
Actually, like, if people are like, what does House Kepler do? And I'm like, predominantly shadow work. Like, it is just
So
all
much.
um the thing with House Kepler stuff, especially like past life stuff that we do, like, you can't not do shadow work if you're working through past life stuff, because you're always carrying the stuff that is loudest about past lives is always tied to difficult things.
Mhm.
To figure out, like, how do you feel about those, and actually, like, confront them, and but so much of this is pulling things out of the hidden spaces in your life and your psyche and your world, and looking at them, like, really taking a look at them for the first time.
Yeah, I come from originally like a Buddhist background, like Hindu gurus. That was kind of like my early introduction into the woo. And I remember one of my early guru teachers said that there are two byproducts of like major byproducts of how you'll know that you've gone into a deep meditative state where you can do a lot of magical work. And the byproducts are no worrying. When you're in that state, you are in complete power of yourself and your magical skills, and increased synchronicities.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when we get into our grooves on these shows, those two things start to happen. We're in, you almost go into a vortex. You're not worried about the mundane world. You're in this vortex of what if and liminality and magic. And then the synchronicities just start to unfold rapidly. And, that's when things start to get like really hairy and weird.
Very much. Well, and to a point where if you have not been immersed in a moment like that, it sounds like madness.
It does.
There's,
And it
there's
sometimes
that,
feels that way.
yeah, there's that thing that gets translated out of Buddhism into English as crazy wisdom.
Yeah.
And like, one of my capstone papers in college for the some of the master's work was on mystical experience. Uh, Shout out to Dr. Paul Natupsky. And the thing about mystical experience, regardless of the religion of the mystic, there's a point where it sort of lifts above the details of the religion itself, and they all start talking about a very similar experience. And things that it has in common is ecstasis, not just in the sense of ecstasy, even though Saint Teresa of Avila definitely embodied it as ecstasy, but ecstasis as in sort of like being lifted up and out of not just your body, but the mundanity of your regular existence. Like, you've been transported to something that feels
Yeah.
other,
From
elsewhere.
gross
Yeah.
sensation to subtle. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't want to, like, say that it is easily reducible as a binary, because it's not that the flesh is bad and the spirit is good. It's more that, like, there's a different perspective that is not as muddied as just like the minutia of day-to-day existence can be. And there's a clarity that comes with that, an expansiveness where there's an awareness that everything is connected, that you are a unique quantity within this thing, but you are also a part of everything. And there's points where you, to the limits of the boundaries of human consciousness, that I can say will get stretched to points that are sometimes very like, feels like gauging your ears.
Yes, or worse.
Yeah, or worse.
Much worse.
But like that point where, like, you're able to perceive so many things at once, that when you come back down from that state, that the biggest thing, the ineffability is of course a buzzword with good omens, but the ineffability of mystical experience, ineffability is, you can't put it into words. It is not something that is easily pinned down in language or practical terms. And that ineffability makes most of these experiences sound like crazy wisdom, because when you try to put them into our awkward, limited language, it
Nada.
you're always doing like, most like, well, I saw a ghost. Well, no, I don't see ghosts, not like with my eyes. Because if you notice, usually I'm taking my glasses off or closing my eyes. I'm describing them visually, because that's the nearest sense that appeals strongly to me, that is the best way to process what I'm perceiving in a way that this brain can handle. because this brain's in a physical body and has to kind of deal with the tools that it's got.
Exactly.
But all of this stuff is beyond those bounds. And again, we go to beyond the bounds, like living in those liminal spaces, inhabiting those liminal spaces, having experiences that push us, challenge us to move beyond what we inhabit on a regular daily basis and what is reinforced to us as reality. That is initiation.
Yes. Thank you, whoever that last human was. Woohoo! Yes.
Kicking my butt. Yeah, by the chat. Yeah. Oh,
I
there's
understand.
you
Yes.
are all yeah, you talk. I just blurted out a whole bunch of wisdom. I'm gonna
No, it was wonderful.
brush my teeth.
I would just say yes to that comment, that you will get to see me be very vulnerable, and some of the other casting crew going through their shadow work. And I think sometimes seeing other people go through it makes it feel like, okay, I'm not in this by myself. And so there is going to be a lot of that you will see, and it's still going on. And the next time we dip into filming for season 2, I imagine that the vortex will just open up even bigger.
So when I initially got involved in paranormal stuff as someone who was already an occultist, a spirit worker, practicing witchcraft and all the weird stuff that I do, a lot of my witchcraft and occult friends were like, why are you, I mean, like those people. And the reason is like, in the paranormal, most of the people who are ghost hunting are still wrestling with the question, could this be real?
Mm.
Is this maybe, and they're trying to use the tools that reality told them that should work. So they try to take pictures of ghosts, and they try to get ghosts to talk to them on recordings and things, and they like try to chase after them with stuff. Whereas in magic, and in the various aspects of the magical subject, there's no question that spirits exist. You work with them regularly. You talk with them. You don't need an EVP to know that your ancestors are communicating with you. Like you're starting at a completely different place. And so
Right.
the quest for physical validation is sort of a distraction for many people who are already practicing there. So the question was like, why are you doing this? And I'm like, not everybody's there. Like, not everybody's coming from a family practice. Not everybody is coming from having so many experiences that they couldn't deny it. And the quest is really important. The fact that people are asking the question is important enough for me to actually like hide, not intentionally hide, but like just leave off camera probably 80% of my practice, because it's too deep a pool for someone who's just at the point of like, if that was you, if you are a ghost, let me know.
Yeah.
And my complaint to the paranormal broadly remains that we will focus, most of the shows focus too much on, we're trying to get evidence, when, to me, the most profound thing about this is the journey of the people asking the questions.
Yes. The experiences.
Yeah. How it changes you, how you realize you're a part of it, how none of those experiences would exist for you if you weren't present to witness them, if you weren't asking the questions, if you weren't open to the answers. And I don't think enough of the shows go into that. Really, it is incredibly vulnerable and incredibly intimate to not just sit there and like try to get a ghost to tap something out on your K2 meter, but to actually go, this is what I felt.
Mm-hmm.
This is how it changed. This is how it challenged my views about reality.
Yeah. Agreed. Ooh, all right. I think we're getting a line from Kat that we need to wrap it up here.
Okay, that's cool. I talk a lot. Hopefully it was entertaining.
I talk a lot too. I have a podcast. We're chatty.
How long did our podcast run when you interviewed me?
Almost 5 hours. Yeah.
Oh
so
Lord, yeah. So
you don't
just
get
all
that.
day.
I mean, the episodes, if anybody wants to listen to them, they're called Interview with the Vampire Part 1 and 2, and they are shortened. You don't get the full 5 hours.
It's not like a Critical Role episode.
Yeah. But thank you everyone for your support and for listening and for supporting queer content, and representation matters. And yes, love you too, Whispering
I
Tongues.
also, I didn't get a chance to make a shout out to all of my queer witches who have done fantastic work, but I saw Matt Oren come up, and I want to shout out to Christopher Penzak in the Temple of Witchcraft and his partners, and Storm and Chaz and everybody, because there are so many voices out there, and there are so many fantastic people, and so many like just between walkers and liminal folks who live in a space that we could all learn a great deal from.
Yay, the gays! Yes, Julia. All right. Well, we will be back with more live streams, and we are really excited because there's some guests we're going to have that are kick-ass. I'm very excited. And you can listen to us forever if you want, but we thought we'd shake it up a little bit.
I like more perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely. Where to send weird image ideas mentioned in the beginning of the stream. You can send that to newbloodtv@gmail.com. Yeah, and you can send anything there if you want. There's also like a contact form on the webpage too, if that's easier for you. Yeah, which is newblood.tv, as you see everywhere.
And there's ways to send comments on the Kickstarter too.
Yes, and please do that. For those of you who have backed this, definitely, if you have the time, give us a shout out in the comments, because we love to hear from you, and everybody has so many amazing things to share and offer. So, yeah.
And I will end this with, however weird you think you are,
It's not that weird.
Reality weirder.
Yes. All right. Goodbye.